Well, I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I've documented my finds over the years. And I've been pretty good about documenting exactly where I found relics, the date I found them, maybe who I was with. But there's a lot of the story that doesn't get told in this digging log. This is a digging log my dad gave me before I went to boot camp, and I didn't do any journaling there in boot camp, but since I've gotten out, I've done a lot of journaling on relics I've found. And this tells some portion of the story, but there's a lot of the story that isn't told with the relics I've found. What happened that day, what the find means to me, why I feel the find is significant. So with that in mind, I've decided to start doing a daily video series that I'm going to call Daily Digger's Log. And in the series, I'm going to go through and I'm going to feature short, concise videos that tell a history of some of the relics I've found, and when I'm on the road, some of the relics that other hunters have found. I'm going to visit with other people and feature them and their relics. And we're going to try and tell some of the story that's between the lines of the typical digger's log. And I think this will be a good way for me to not only continue to create, I thrive on creating things, I'm a musician and an artist, but it'll be a way for me to continue to give you guys some relevant content as well. So I hope you guys enjoy the series, and I'm going to kick right into it right now with the very first installment of the Daily Dig Log. So for the first installment of the Daily Dig Log, I'd like to talk a little bit about my first relic. It makes sense, we'll start at the beginning. My very first relics, I started relic hunting when I was a little kid, and I arrowhead hunted a lot with my dad, and then I grew up in colonial Virginia, so I had a lot of opportunities to find pipe stems and things like that while I was playing in the dirt. And as I was growing up, my dad started metal detecting when I was a kid. So I got to watch him find all sorts of treasures and cut coins and beautiful colonial items from there in Virginia. And it always fascinated me, but as I grew up, my interests drifted all over the place. I became a teenager, and like many teenagers, I had a chip on my shoulder for my dad, and that chip on my shoulder quickly grew into a rift that had grown between the two of us, and I had created it. I was a selfish kid. My dad was an amazing father, scoutmaster, and a great role model. But that chip that I had on my shoulder had put a great distance between us, to the point where we didn't speak very often. And one year in my adult life, my dad sent me a metal detector for my birthday. And I remember getting the metal detector and thinking, oh, that's cool, you know, and I stuck it in the corner and didn't think much about it until a friend of mine came by who had a metal detector, and he said, hey, let's go metal detecting. His name was Tim, real nice guy, and he lives in Texas now. But anyhow, Tim said, let's go metal detecting, and we loaded up our metal detectors and we went looking for the oldest house we could find. And we found an old house over near Washington College Academy. I've done a video on that place. And we started hunting, and my very first relic was this button right here. Now I know that this doesn't look like much, it's kind of diminutive, but to me this was a very, very special find. I got to looking close at the button, and I started to notice patterns all around the button, and I didn't know what they were, so I called my dad that night and I said, I found something, I think it's a button, I want to send you some pictures. Well, he took those pictures and sent them on to another friend who found some documentation on symbols like in this button, and we were able to tie it to the Masons and very possibly to an early Washington Academy button. Our friend Bob Milburn, who's a military historian, found out a lot of that information. We also had some button experts look into it. So these symbols started to tell a different story. This is a Masonic button, and of course I was immediately enthralled with metal detecting, and I couldn't wait for the next day to get back out there and metal detect again. So the next day I drove back out to the site, and I found more stuff. I found, I think, a seated Liberty, dime, and a few more flat buttons. And of course that night I rushed home and I called Dad back up, and we talked about what I had found. And slowly this passion for metal detecting drew us back together. We talked every single day, and I think we've talked nearly every single day since I found this button. So this button has a lot of significance to me, not only in that it was my first find metal detecting, but also in that it was the find that brought my father and I back together and helped me brush the chip off my shoulder and him to forgive me for having a chip on my shoulder for so long. So I hope you guys enjoy this little series. I'm going to try it again tomorrow, so we'll see how it goes. I hope you have a great night. See you tomorrow.